6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the new production facility of the Rocket Factory. We are delighted that so many experts and multipliers are taking part in our virtual opening event. Welcome. Since you unfortunately cannot be present in person, let me briefly say a few things about this beautiful, historic and magical place in which the Rocket Factory has now moved into. The energy-saving bulb was invented here in the former Osram halls in Augsburg. In 1985, Augsburg engineer Alfred Wacker presented what he called the first electronic energy-saving bulb, which started a success story around the world from here. This bulb consumed 80% less electricity for the same light output. That this is good for the environment is immediately obvious to everyone. Today, we are in the exact hall where the machines for bulb production were manufactured. Osram is now history, and we are leading mechanical engineering into a new future. Today, a new generation of young engineers from 25 countries is working here on innovations that will similarly make a major contribution to environmental protection. Observing our planet and our climate requires numerous small satellites that must be transported into the low Earth orbit. And our rocket from Augsburg will launch hundreds of these satellites into space in the near future. This means that once again we can contribute to improving the world from Augsburg. Ladies and gentlemen, let your imagination run wild for a minute. Imagine that one day in the not too distant future, space transportation will work like the transportation service provided by Uber. Our rockets will launch every week or more frequently at unmatched low prices. Customers can easily select a launch date on demand via an app, and we launch on time and equivalent to a shared cab ride, deliver the freight exactly where it's supposed to be, right to the front door of their houses. This is not a dream, ladies and gentlemen, and will become reality in a few years. This is our mission. Only if we significantly reduce the cost of space transportation, private providers will be able to earn money in space. Hundreds of startups are already waiting on the starting blocks with their business ideas. After all, it's not just about a better and more closely meshed observation of our blue planet, but also about a global digital network from orbit. Lower prices will enable more competition in space, creating a new market. Ladies and gentlemen, all those who plan to do something in space in the future will choose our concept, because our launch vehicles combine three key competitive advantages: precise delivery on orbit to the desired position, an extremely cost-effective pricing, and superior propulsion technology. With the staged combustion technology, our engine is more powerful, efficient and cleaner than most launch vehicles currently on the market. We want to build not only the most eco-friendly micro-launcher in the world, but also the most cost-efficient one. Ultimately, Europe's state-funded space industry also benefits from this price competition. And the European Space Agency, ESA, has recognized this trend and commissioned our small startup with a groundbreaking study. As consortium leader, we are to work together with OHB System and NT Aerospace to find out what European space transportation might look like in the future. We are particularly proud of this, specifically since the two other studies are conducted by such renowned companies as Ariane Group and Avio. For us, this is a great leap of faith and proof of our efficient corporate setup. We accept the challenge of shaping the future of European spaceflight together with all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, our announcement to produce the world's lowest cost small launch rocket has created a lot of impact in the international space community. Many customers were keen to learn more and are already seeking advice on how they can take advantage of our favorable offer. Many competitors are alarmed and spread doubts on the feasibility of our ambitious plans. We will prove here in Augsburg that it is possible to significantly reduce the cost of space transportation with highly efficient rockets. How do we want to achieve this? We will do this by building rockets like cars. We combine maximum performance with ultra-low-cost manufacturing processes and design principles. As a first step, we will be producing prototypes of our engines and rockets in these halls. For this, we intend to use an agile process to find out how we can consistently produce engines and rockets in series in the future. We will transfer the successful manufacturing strategies of the automotive industry to the production of rockets. We will develop platform-based configurations which we can adapt to customers' mission requirements at any time. We will use as many identical parts as possible. We will consistently purchase industrial components and adapt them to the particularly harsh conditions in space. We will also consistently apply 3D printing technologies. Augsburg is a very important location for the development of series production. This city, dear Madam Mayor, is not only particularly livable, but also very attractive environment for innovative startups. Many examples of successful startups show that the city of Augsburg is a great incubator for strong ideas for the future. We were able to experience this ourselves for 2.5 years at the Technology Center in Augsburg. Here in Augsburg, the rocket factory also benefits from the close bonds between research and the innovative automotive landscape and mechanical engineering industries in Bavaria and neighboring Baden-Württemberg. At the same time, we are benefiting from the numerous initiatives of the Bavarian government, which has set out to keep Bavaria the leading space nation fit for the future in an increasingly competitive environment. That is why we are particularly pleased that Minister President Markus Söder sent us a video message at the start of production in the rocket factory premises here in Augsburg. This proves how much Bavaria appreciates and supports small space startups. Augsburg and Bavaria are a good basis for conquering the market in space. May the force be with us. May the better company win. Thank you for your attention.
Hi everyone. Thank you for participating in this opening event. We will do our very best to give you a concise overview of Rocket Factory today. This historic facility is home to our team and home to our vision. We are 85 people from 25 different nations on a mission to conquer space with a new generation of low-cost, dedicated launch vehicles. And we are putting in everything we got to make this a reality. Most importantly, I would like to thank my team for pushing so incredibly hard. You are great. You dedicated all your focus to Rocket Factory, around the clock, for little pay. Why do you do this? Because you strongly believe that the hardware and software we create in this facility will revolutionize access to space with small, industrially made launch vehicles. Our ultra-high performance engine concept is one of the core elements required to turn this vision into a reality. There are two questions that have created quite some astonishment, in particular with our competitors. How do we succeed to develop such a complex system in such an incredibly ambitious time frame? And on top of this, how can we do all of this in such a cost-effective manner? This sounds like we are trying to do the impossible, and it's obvious why we will receive so many critical questions from experts as well as journalists. We are excited to bring these circumstances up for discussion. At the end of the day, we are iterating the techno-financial solutions to these questions on a daily basis here at Rocket Factory. And we would love to be inspired. We are inspired by ideas as well as your doubts. We started this venture in this historic facility to prove that our vision can be made real with science, engineering, and a new disruptive approach for design to cost. Our customers tell us we're on the right track. The small launch vehicle market has undergone some drastic changes in the last years. Larger payloads, lower prices. Our answer to this commercial development is an engine technology that features a very high performance index, manufactured in an industrial environment that allows us to produce them for low cost. We already carried out the first ignition tests on the prototype motor. Within the next months, we will complete the first engine run, and these tests will demonstrate what we promised. This will allow us to take a pole position in the race to space. The future has a place only for the most performant and most efficient concepts that can be made at the lowest possible cost. Our concept will triumph over those of our competition. The history of spaceflight has shown success is not necessarily linked to being first, but to being best. Elon Musk, the pioneer that has single-handedly created the new space sector, has demonstrated that perseverance is key, regardless of how many times things go wrong. Simply don't give up. This requires a radical approach towards openness to new solutions and new ideas that allow for lower costs and higher performances. Better is the enemy of good. Challenge yourself to give up concepts and solutions that are just good and allow for solutions that are better in the overarching sense. It is crystal clear to me that such an approach is met with lots of skepticism, in particular in Germany. I know that because I spent half of my life abroad. We are a country that loves over-engineering things. Our engineering culture aims for absolute perfection. While this can be a winning strategy, it can also result in products and services that are simply not competitive. Rocket Factory is laser focused on delivering a minimum viable product first. This approach is the opposite of the good old space industry. We strongly believe, just like many software startups, in agile development methods. We use state-of-the-art software tools for modeling large solution spaces, but we are focusing on a minimum viable product first. It's an iterative process that allows for continuous updates that will gradually increase performances and lower cost. Sparse matrix engineering at its best. That approach allows us to circumvent the traditionally set limits of the engineering art. We push towards the edge of the physically possible, and by doing so, we are reinterpreting and redefining the boundary conditions. We function like a Formula One team. We extract every bit of possible performance from this machine. Starting at the pole position is an advantage, but the final success depends on the engine, the structure, the electronics, the logistical environment, the technicians, the driver, the entire team. This is no walk in the park, it's a constant battle. This battle we fight every day, and we will succeed and we will win. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, today is the day these two guys have been waiting for eagerly, and we are so happy that you joined. Welcome to the opening of the Rocket Factory here in Augsburg. We are more than happy that you've joined, and you will for sure get further insights into new space, and we're happy that you celebrate this special day with us. My name is Alissa Stein, and I am the host for this event, and next to me are the two founders, starting with Dr. Stefan Brieschenk, who is the Chief Operation Officer, and Jörn Spurmann. He is the Chief Commercial Officer. Hello, you two.
Hi.
Hi. So we've just met you in the keynotes. Thank you very much for giving this introduction. And Jörn, I was wondering, today we have a top-class panel. What are you most interested to learn?
Yeah, I totally agree. The panel that we have is really exciting, and I think a good mix of different assets. I think one aspect, the commercialization of European space transportation, is very interesting, and I hope that we will get some insights into that. On top of that, the national perspective on this element as well. We are in Augsburg. We are in Germany, so there's a view on that as well. And beyond that, I'm very interested in what we will actually learn from all the people, what they think about Rocket Factory. And I hope that the several hundred of people who are listening and participating to the event will do the same and give us some feedback of what they think about the event and Rocket Factory in general.
Yeah, definitely. Stefan, today is a special day. How did you prepare and how does it feel to that special day?
It's super special for us. We are set up right here in the manufacturing hall, and as a matter of fact, we could not stop our technical progress. And I want to give you some looks behind the scene. Behind us is actually the first stage, fully qualified, and today on the schedule of progress is actually welding the dome caps for the first launch vehicle. And I can show you some of those details over here. What you can see here is actually the 3 dome caps that form the top, bottom, and intermediate perimeters for the first stage propellant tank. You can see in the very rear, that's basically the bottom. You can see 9 holes. These are the outlets for the individual motors. Every motor produces roughly about 500,000 horsepower. This is the intermediate bulkhead, sits in between, basically separates propellants, and this is the top bulkhead, and we can see Malte, who's just welding the dome cap into the dome. And within the next couple of weeks, we're integrating all of this with what you see here on the left-hand side, which is basically the core structure. So we're super excited to have you here today. We set up in the manufacturing hall of Rocket Factory. It's a little disruption for us, but we can promise you progress is not interrupted by a second.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I told you that you will get further insights. And Jörn, I was wondering, so you have been asked by the European Space Agency to conduct a study about the future of the European space transportation sector, which must be a huge honor. But which results are you expecting?
Yes, first of all, you're totally right. It is really a great honor for us. And we also believe it's a great leap of faith from ESA to trust into Rocket Factory at such an early stage. So really great. What we would like to take the challenge and the opportunity and really to turn it around. What we would like to show is that there are concepts and ideas, and that we can do them in a commercial fashion and in commercial approaches, like we're doing the same here with a micro launcher and Rocket Factory. Maybe these things exist on a bigger scale for European space transportation as well, and we will assess that. We are very sure that there still will be institutional needs and scientific mission scenarios which can't be matched by that, but ideally we find a combination of both, that the European taxpayers benefit from that. We actually launched a survey involving as many stakeholders as possible throughout the last week, so check our LinkedIn profile. You will see the link. Every European citizen or worldwide is invited to participate. We would be happy to have everyone's feedback and to build that actually in.
And what do you think when the results will be available?
The preliminary results of the study will be available by end of May, and the study will officially close with documentation by end of June.
Okay, great. Stefan, you already mentioned it in your keynote that you're mostly asked with 2 specific questions and that also your competitors are wondering most about it. So how can you produce such a complex technology with that small amount of money and also in such a short time?
We have a very strong competitive advantage. And this competitive advantage lies within us finding our first investor. Our first investor is the OHB Group. Now, the OHB Group, most of you know, is home to the finest space engineering on the planet. And for sure, this is a vantage point if you can basically tie in such a strong company into the very first investment round. Now, it's not just OHB, it's a lot of other companies like MT Aerospace with which we have basically built a network of industrialization around our product, and the result is our progress. We don't start from scratch. A lot of the technologies we use were actually funded by ESA at some point, and we basically have this unique advantage of just combining a lot of the industry strengths into this startup. And the ultimate answer is it's the industrialization network that is key to our fast progress, and this is why this is so attractive also for investors.
Thank you very much. And for now, I have to say goodbye and thank you, because we will talk after the panel in a few minutes. But before we start with the panel, we also want to have a look at a very special video message, because maybe you already know that Bavaria is key location for the aerospace industry and is ideally positioned technologically in many areas. And with the new space strategy Bavaria 1, Bavaria will invest more than 700 million in the upcoming years to become Europe's #1 in aerospace. So we are very thankful that we have received the video message of the Bavarian Minister President Markus Söder. Let's have a look.
Space, the final frontier. So beginnt der erste Satz bei Raumschiff Enterprise bei Star Trek. Seit meiner Kindheit bin ich ein großer Fan davon. Doch es geht nicht nur um Science Fiction. Heute ist ein Teil dieser Science Fiction von damals Realität geworden und war Antrieb und Motivation für viele, die sich mit Luft- und Raumfahrt beschäftigt haben. Heute ist wieder ein weiterer Schritt da. Ein weiterer Schritt für die Raumfahrt in Bayern, und zwar in ganz besonderer Form. Raumfahrt war früher etwas, was ein bisschen einen militärischen Nutzen hatte, der Wettbewerb der Großmächte. Es ging mehr um Status, denn um wissenschaftlichen Nutzen. Heute hat sich das verändert. Wir sehen die Möglichkeiten der Luft- und Raumfahrt auch im privaten Bereich. New Space ist eine Form, wo viel mehr daran teilhaben können. Die Rocket Factory ist ein Bestandteil der Luft- und Raumfahrtszene in Bayern, wo mit neuen Trägerraketen neue Möglichkeiten geschaffen werden. Wir in Bayern setzen sehr drauf, auch ich ganz persönlich. Mit unserem Raumfahrtkonzept haben wir am Anfang ein bisschen Spott erfahren. Vor allem von denjenigen, die null Ahnung haben von der Bedeutung. Bedeutung deswegen, weil heute es ja nicht nur darum geht, in die Tiefen des Alls zu blicken, sondern alles, was wir im Orbit planen, machen und denken, hat immer auch mit uns selbst zu tun. Wenn es um Klimaschutz geht, Wasserplanung, landwirtschaftliche Prozesse, dann lässt sich das aus der Atmosphäre am besten beobachten und planen. Es gibt so unglaublich viele Projekte, die unmittelbar damit verbunden sind. Wir in Bayern fördern das. Gerade in der Region, in der ihr entsteht, in der die neuen Ideen hier stattfinden, werden neue Cluster auch entwickeln. Wir gründen ja auch insgesamt haben eine Fakultät gegründet für Luft- und Raumfahrt. Das wird die größte werden, die es in Europa gibt, weil wir ein Zentrum für diese neuen Ideen entbinden und einbinden wollen. Das ist der Auftrag, den wir haben. Deswegen wünsche ich euch viel Erfolg. Ich wünsche den Ideen viel Erfolg, diesen jungen Unternehmerinnen und Unternehmern, die alles dafür tun, damit man auch in der Zukunft sich mit Luft- und Raumfahrt in Bayern verbindet. Deswegen viel Erfolg und live long and prosper.
A special thank you to Mr. Söder. Thank you for that video message. And you've all heard it, how important the new space industry is for Bavaria in specific. And now, welcome to our panel discussion with a space industry expert. And you know that space industry is undergoing rapid political, economic and technologically change worldwide, and we want to talk about the future of the European space industry and space flight beyond Ariane 6 and Vega C, and what course Europe needs to set in order to start the commercialization in Europe. I want to discuss with my guest Josef Aschbacher. He is ESA Director General. Hi, Mr. Aschbacher.
Hello, good afternoon to Augsburg from Paris.
Oh, from Paris. Bonjour. Then
Bonjour.
We also have Professor Ulrich Walter, who is professor at the Technische Universität München. Hello.
I say hello from Munich.
Hello. And I welcome Matthias Wachter, Head of Department Cooperation, Security, Raw Materials and Space at BDE. Hello.
Oh, from Berlin.
And Christoph Käse, he's the CEO of the Axel Springer Consulting Group.
Hi, good to see everybody. Thanks for inviting me.
Hello. Thank you very much that you are our panelists today, because there is a lot that we have to talk about. But before we start, I also want to mention to our participants that, of course, you can always ask your questions. Please use the chat, and then afterwards we will have some time to address your questions. And if you have one specific question for one of our panelists, just type in the name too. Okay, let's start with our panel discussion. Mr. Aschbacher, could you please describe the future of commercialization of the European space flight from the perspective of the ESA?
Okay, this is a very complicated but also a very long question, but let me say a few words on how we see it. As you probably have heard, I'm the Director General of ESA only since a very short time, about 1 month. I started on the 1st of March. And on the first day of being in office, I put a document on the table. I call it Agenda 2025, where I really highlight some of the key elements of where I believe ESA should go, the European Space Agency, but not only ESA, but really Europe in space. And one of the 5 top priorities I highlight and I describe in much detail in this Agenda 2025 is exactly commercialization. Commercialization meaning what do we do and how do we go in space in investing and allowing companies like RFA to prosper, to become successful, and to really create businesses in Germany, but also worldwide. And of course, you mentioned it, the big question I always get, and since I'm in office, but also before, is why do we not have an Elon Musk in Europe? Why don't we not have Spacex in Europe? And I think what you are doing at Rocket Factory is a good step in this direction. Of course, you have still some way to go. Elon Musk also started, as you all know, more than 10 years ago, more than 15 years ago, actually. Today, very successful, but I see a lot of interesting activities in Rocket Factory Augsburg, and I wish you really all the best from all my heart, that you succeed, that you become the next Elon Musk here in Europe.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that is a huge aim to become the next Elon Musk. Mr. Wachter, you have convinced the public that we need a strong private sector industry in Germany, and you are also fighting for a launch site in the North Sea. From the perspective of the German industry, what hurdles do you see for the commercialization of the European space flight?
First of all, I think we have to understand that space, in new space, is not only about rockets, it's about the entire ecosystem. And rockets play a very important part in that. For example, there won't be any Internet of Things or autonomous driving without space and space applications. So space is really becoming extremely crucial for the entire German and European industry. And that's why we must move forward. And I think Rocket Factory, like Jörn and Stefan and the entire team presented us today, is on the right track to contribute to this significantly. And I have the impression that the public is getting more and more interested and excited about what's going on in space, in European space. And I think that's a very good development where we can build on, and we need to strengthen that. And I wish Rocket Factory all the best in moving into this direction.
But would you say that we already overcome the hurdles of the commercialization?
I think there are still some challenges, yeah. There's extremely strong competition globally from the US. We talked about SpaceX, but there's also increased competition from players like India or China, yeah. And I think in Europe we need a kind of a thinking shift of how we perceive space. Yeah, we need to let private companies and startups do their job and give them access to programs. I think that's very important, and I think what ESA is doing together with the German government, with the micro-launcher competition, for example, I think that goes into the right direction, but we need to see more of that. And but I think we are on a good track.
Thank you very much. Mr. Walter, in an article in the German newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine, you explained the new German Space Valley, which looks like a triangle between Garching, Ottobrunn and Oberpfaffenhofen. But my question is, have you not forgot Augsburg so that it is rather a square and not a triangle?
Well, yes, it would have to have included Augsburg, but then it would have been no longer a triangle, you know, and this was a problem. Actually, there would be much more, for example, Garmisch-Partenkirchen, where we do also some space research. So it wouldn't be any more, it would be a polygon. So we wouldn't like to do that. Of course, we include all space companies and institutions doing space in the area of Greater Munich, so to say.
Okay. Mr. Käse, you are an acclaimed author and also a dedicated tech blogger. Please give us the big picture. How much innovation does space industry bring to the German industry? Mr. Käse, can you hear me? Are you still with us?
I have to unmute myself. Sorry, I needed to unmute myself. Space industry will certainly give a lot of innovation to the industry. And Stefan and Jörn mentioned it in their opening remarks, that it's no coincidence that RFA is located in Augsburg, because that region of the country and of Europe is very well known for its high-tech industry, but also for its metal industry. So building a rocket to a large degree is working with metal, and this region is highly skilled in exercising these skills from the automotive industry, of course. So this can be well utilized, but far beyond the rockets themselves, we will see a boost of innovation because rockets transport satellites to space, and we're talking low orbit launches here. So satellites that will be flying pretty close to Mother Earth. They will not be geostationary, but they will fly around very quickly around the Earth in huge constellations in many parts, and be very, very close compared to traditional satellites to the Earth's surface. So they will be able to monitor what we are doing on this surface of this planet very, very closely, enabling a whole new host of applications. I compare it, I don't think it's overdrawn to compare it to the invention of the smartphone. The smartphone itself is a very interesting product, but it's also a platform for a multitude of other products. And the same will be true for the micro launcher industry and the micro satellite industry. It will be a platform that will enable many, many other technologies, which we can only dream about today. Some of them we can kind of guess where they will be, but many of them we will simply have to wait what the future brings. But it will be an enabling infrastructure. And this is what's so interesting. And this is why, last sentence on this one, why we shouldn't be too afraid of China running ahead, or US or India. We should build our own industry, because Europe, to a certain degree, in this very important infrastructure field, should have its own autonomous systems and not rely on other regions in the world.
What an interesting comparison. Thank you for that. I mean, the next smartphone, everyone uses it, and I think that's really great and a great future. Mr. Aschbacher, if you look back on the ESA strategy, has the agency relied on an outdated concept for too long? I know it's a little bit critical question, but shouldn't Europe have initiated the change of a strategy for smaller missiles long ago? We've already talked about the huge competition from the US.
Yeah. No, Alisa, I think your question is a bit provocative, but I think there's a lot of truth in it as well. And I had recently a very good, a very interesting discussion with a former DG of ESA, Jean-Jacques Dordain, very well known to Rocket Factory Augsburg. Of course, we have been investing, and we are investing in our government-supported launcher. Ariane 6 is the next one, and Vega C in the smaller segment is the smaller launcher. And they will be very good launchers, technologically extremely performant, very capable and very good launchers. However, and this is a big however, the price is a very important issue. And the price is exactly what both Jörn and Stefan have mentioned before, is one of the elements you are focusing on. And I can only look forward to see what happens and what you're offering, because this is certainly an issue where we need to further work also in Europe. But let me put things in context. Of course, we do have the developments of the Ariane program since the very early days, since the beginning. In fact, this is the very origin of the European Space Agency. But I think we are today entering a very, and we have accumulated an enormous amount of excellence and capabilities, and our engineers across Europe, many of them in Germany also, are top class, and they are really among the best engineers in the world. But what really has changed is this new space paradigm. You mentioned Elon Musk, but he's not the only one. He's, of course, the most visible one, because he makes a lot of noise and a lot of PR also with his activities. But there's a lot of those happening. And this really comes from the US. So you have mentioned Silicon Valley. I have recently really investigated and looked a bit more in detail what drives Silicon Valley and what makes it successful. I've been in Spacex, I've been in Google, I've done many of the other companies. And I think there are three elements that you need to be successful. One, of course, is talent, people who are driven by an idea and talented and have all the willingness to do it. And I see in Stefan and Björn and exactly these kind of people. The second is access to money. Access to money, of course, the Silicon Valley, where 63% of all venture capital is located, is much easier than maybe somewhere in Europe. And the third is speed. That means to be fast, responsive, and be capable of interacting very quick. And on ESA's side, I really would like to tackle these elements. Talent, of course, is in the various countries in industry, but I really would like to offer companies also access to funding and venture capital companies and others, but also making sure that we as a public entity are much faster, much more responsive to work with you guys at RFA and similar companies. And this is not only in rockets, as it was said before by Matthias very correctly, this new space commercialization goes across the whole space domain, across the technology domain. And there I really would like to work as well to be responsive and cultivate and bring up this ecosystem of companies, startups to succeed in the commercial world. And this is one of the ambitions I really have, and I'm very committed to it. And that's why I'm so happy to see you at RFA being so active and so dynamic.
We are also very happy to have you just at your start in our panel discussion. Now that we've talked a lot about the global competition, Mr. Walter, I'm interested how you think about it. Will Europe be the globally sought after partner in the future of the space transportation?
So the question was the after part of the space transportation?
Sought after partner. So is Europe like a highly recommended and appreciated partner?
Within the international?
Yeah.
Well, whenever you lived in the United States, they talk about Europe about the old world. And actually they're right from their point of view. The reason is both China, the United States and India, they expect from the future a better future. This is different in Europe. The European people are very old and they're afraid of the future. I think this is the reason, the deep reason, why in Europe space faring or going to space is not that popular like in the other parts of the world. However, it is our pro that we are quite eager. If I look at my students, so to say, they are so bright students, I still have, and that didn't change over the years, over the decades. So we have excellent students who are eager to go into space and work as an engineer. However, our problem is that the nations and the public is not interested in space flight. We have to change that. And I think it's not only part of the ESA, but also part of the media. This is why I'm very open to media to change that. So I hope, to give you an answer to the question, is I hope that the public view of space will change in the future. And from that on, I'm convinced that also the companies, the institution will have a brighter future for space in Europe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walter. I totally agree, because we just had the discussion that we really need to make it to a broader audition and talking about new space with everyone. Mr. Kaiser, we've just heard it, the global comparison. How important are innovative startups like the Rocket Factory for Europe in general?
Well, if they don't do it, most likely nobody else is going to do it. What we're seeing across all industries that startups are really driving the change for disruptive innovation. This is not to say that legacy companies are not innovative. They're very innovative, but they are specialized in one certain form of innovation, which is called sustaining innovation. So keeping your old business model intact, carrying your legacy weight, and try to not disrupt your traditional business because you have something to lose. When you have something to lose, you're not very keen on disrupting it. Now, when you look at the traditional space industry, it's a big industry. It's a legacy industry. It has legacy infrastructure, which is not to say that it's bad. It has its purposes and it fulfills its purposes, but there are new disruptors out in the market. And when you look at RFA, for example, they have announced a price for the launch which is unprecedented. It's never heard of. It's a fraction of a traditional launch. It doesn't go as high. It doesn't go to geostationary positions, but it doesn't have to, because it's aiming at a certain part of the market, which is the low orbit satellite market, as we discussed earlier. And the prices are totally stunning when you're coming from the traditional industry. Stefan has elaborated on how this is possible, and Jörn has also made mention of that. It is what they call a Henry Ford moment, right? They are taking rocket science and turning it, and this is why it's such a beautiful name, I think. They're turning it into rocket factories. So we're creating the benefit of mass production. So we're going out of the lot size one production that the traditional space industry is in most of its part, at least for the rockets themselves, and moving it to a rocket system that will launch, as they have put it, every Monday morning at 9 o'clock. So 50 launches a year or something. This is unprecedented. This is disruptive, and my certain belief is it wouldn't have happened if it were not for startup companies. And this is not only true for this industry, it is true for almost any industry, finance, logistics, or you name it, tourism, you name it. The innovation comes from young companies.
Yeah, definitely. Mr. Wachter, how can we increase the presence of new space activities in Germany? What is your advice?
I think we need to link it to other non-space industries and show the importance space has for other industries, like autonomous driving and Internet of Things I mentioned before, because without having the space infrastructure and the space data available, these technologies on Earth won't work. So it's especially important to us as German industry, which is focused on manufacturing, to achieve this link. And I think what we also need to do is we need to look at the entire space value chain. We have the rockets, we have the satellites, we have the universities, but we also need to launch the rockets. And that's why we initiated the campaign for a German launch site in the North Sea. And when we did so, many people smiled and said, "Hey, are you kidding us? Yeah, how is that going to work? Is that possible, etc." But we are now moving very, very concrete forward. And we have a private consortium set up which says we can do it, we can operate it. And I think having rockets like RFA-1 launching from a launch pad in the North Sea, I think that would change the entire perception of space in Germany, because at the moment we are very good in producing parts and components for space systems. We deliver them somewhere where they get assembled, and then they launch somewhere on this planet, but they don't launch here. You don't see it. You don't have this feeling. Yeah, and I think this could contribute to making space not only a new space more successful, but also giving a totally different perception and how it is seen.
Mr. Aschbacher, what is your opinion on that? Do you agree?
I think competition is good in general, and this is something, of course, also as European Space Agency we are fostering. Our task, our mandate as ESA is really to develop space industry at large. And this doesn't distinguish between big companies, small companies, young companies, or older companies. What we need to do, what we want to do, and this is what our member states ask us, is to really develop space industry. And this is certainly something that that I would like to see. Coming to the point of launch boards in the North Sea, yeah, very exciting. I've seen about it. I've heard about it. I've seen some elements that describe it, and I really would like to see this happening, because this is increasing competition, and therefore, if you have more offer, you have more competition, and that can only help development of space activities at large across Europe.
And so, because we know that the standards for the launches are currently redefined, but outside of Europe. So, how do you want to stop SpaceX from dominating this launch market?
Well, you can not stop others. I think you have to be better in order to overtake them, and that is what RFA is promising, to come with a product that is, in terms of technology, but also in terms of price, very competitive, and then the market will decide, and this will certainly be an important aspect. But let me say one more thing, and this is sometimes forgotten in the discussion on launches and competitiveness and so on. Of course, you need technology that is good, you need a strong team, and all this is excellent. But do not forget that in the US, you have about 40 launches per year. In Europe, you have about 6-7 launches per year. That means you have a very different market, and therefore you can offer very different prices. And I think, in addition to develop the companies that are producing launchers like RFA, we should also work on programs, I call them flagship programs for Europe, where we do need to launch satellites. We have Copernicus and Galileo today as the main flagship programs, which are producing some of the best technology in the world. In fact, here Europe has managed to be a world leader, both in Copernicus and also in Galileo. But we need new flagship programs. And I think this has to go hand in hand. On one side, investment on new satellites and constellations in particular. On the other side, technology that leads to new launches. And I see us as ESA to work on both fronts, or there are several other fronts as well, but at least in this context where we need to work to create this demand on one side and the answer on the other side.
Let's talk about the commercial payloads. And Mr. Walter, in 1993, you flew on board of the Space Shuttle Columbia on a Space Lab mission as a payload specialist. And you spent 9 days, 23 hours and 40 minutes in space. What do you think today? How can we transport commercial payload into space?
Well, there are two parts to distinguish. There is science to be done in space, which is mostly done on the International Space Station. But money is made not on the International Space Station. It's done with satellites in space, in particular communication satellites and remote sensing satellites. So what we need to do is really to focus on making money with those satellites. And this is what RFA is really good about. They bring these small satellites, more satellites, in particular Earth observation satellites or remote sensing satellites, into space in low Earth orbits. This is really the key point in the future of space, I have to tell you. But there is another part, which is commercialization in parts of space tourism. So I think space tourism is very important for the reason that it cuts the prices, because the more people go into space and pay for it, the more rockets will fly into space, in particular in suborbital flights, and this lowers prices, and we need lower prices. In the past, all nations, all spacefaring nations had a kind of monopoly on what they did, and this is why the prices were high. And space tourism and these new startups, they cut prices, and this is what we need. This, of course, is a problem to ESA. I know that this is a problem to NASA and all these space nations, but I'm sure they will adapt to the market. So I'm looking forward for these new rockets, the new satellites, and the new space tourism.
Definitely, yeah. I also want to be a space tourist one day.
Prices are going down. So when they're about $10,000 per flight, I think we both should do that.
Definitely. Mr. Wachter, we have just heard that, or we know that Germany is an over-engineered place and that it's highly bureaucratic to develop the satellites and also rockets. So how can we establish a flexible, agile landscape for innovative startups, especially in Germany?
I think it has been mentioned before that we have great universities, we have great students, young people who want to make a difference. And I think we need to set the framework around them so that they can move forward and that they can try out new things. Yeah, I think that's very important. I think the change has to come bottom up, but to allow that, we need a framework, an ecosystem which allows them to grow and to make a difference. And we have amazing young companies in the new space sector. Alone in the last 3 to 4 years, there have been set up more than 90 companies. Some of them are already world market leader in specific niches. Yeah, and what we need to do is we need to support them, not in a way with, let's say, a traditional government-provided support. I think it would be much more efficient if, for example, ESA would work as an, let's say, anchor customer, yeah, and even if the tenders are very small, I think this could really help these small and innovative companies to move forward and to make a change and a difference, which would again help the entire ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Kieser, you even invested in the rocket factory with your company, and I would like to know what convinced you the most and how can this company make money in space?
Well, to some degree at this early stage, it's a part of belief, but it's also of good sense and good numbers and good businessmanship. I totally believe that there will be a revolution in infrastructure for space, for the space industry, because all the satellite innovation that we talked about won't work if we cannot deliver them. And it doesn't make any sense to build satellites over here and ship them to Asia or to the United States or to India to fly them to space. So there must be an industry here. What I understand from public agencies like ESA, they do not intend to pick up, to become commercial companies. This is certainly not their main goal. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So there is, and that's what I heard from the remarks earlier, there clearly is the political will and the market opportunity for smaller companies. So when we look at this private sector launcher market, we see, of course, a number of companies evolving. There's a lot of innovation on the market, which is good. And among these innovative companies, I personally think that RFA is in a very, very good position. They have a great team. They have great technology. They are very, very ambitious. They work like crazy day and night. And they have this advantage of having an initial investor with OHB, which is an industrialized company in the satellite business. They really know how to industrialize production, but at the same time, they have all the virtues of a startup company. They are quick, they're ambitious, they're hungry, they're willing to really pull off the trick. So they have this background help by OHB, but at the same time have all the liberty and all the passion and all the drive of a startup company. And this is what I see, and I work with many different industries. This is what I see as a winning combination in many other industries. When you combine the advantages of a traditional company with the agility and hunger of a startup company, then it's a winning competition. One of the reasons why startups in many industries like banking, for example, or insurance have such an easy play is because the traditional companies don't really fight back. In many, many cases, startups were extremely successful because the legacy companies didn't defend themselves. But when they do defend themselves, when they pair entrepreneurship with expertise, domain knowledge with disruptive thinking, then it's almost unbeatable. And this is what I see here. It's a very unique combination.
Yeah, I'm sure they're very happy and they love to hear that. Thank you very much. We received some questions from the audience that I would like to address to you, starting with a question to Mr. Aschbacher. And the question is, the US government for many years now has led millions and billions of dollars for government space-oriented contracts. This has fostered the commercial space flight industry. What is the EU government doing to foster this private-public partnership to fund small private startups like the RFA?
Thank you, Alisa, and whoever asked the question is an excellent question, and I really like it, because this is at the core of my new strategy in ESA. I mentioned at the beginning a document called Agenda 2025. I will introduce it to the press, to the public in 1 week's time. And you will probably read about it. And it's really what I want to do. I would like to have an awareness in Europe of where Europe stands as a continent or as a collection of countries as compared to the United States, as compared to China and to other countries. And there, space has a very different value in terms of as a strategic asset of the countries, but also how much money they put in order to support activities. Just to mention that the public spending in the US is about 6 times more than in Europe. If you put all the space fundings together of ESA, European Commission and member states, and there Europe has a clear disadvantage. So therefore I really would like to raise this debate on what Europe wants in space as an ambition to a higher level also in politicians, to make Europe more of a space power, more of a space continent, and make space more important for European citizens, because there's so much to do and there's so much to gain. We have heard climate change, we have heard exploration, we have heard astronauts, we have heard so many aspects, and space is in so many domains so active, and I really would like to foster this and to bring this one level up. Maybe one last comment, if you allow me, on this point. It was Matthias Wachter who said before that ESA should act as an anchor tenant. Yes, I fully agree. And yes, that is what I plan to do. You will read it in this famous Agenda 2025. This is something we have to engage as well, in addition to our classical role in space.
Thank you very much. The next question goes to everyone. With so many small launches and launches expected in the coming decades, how do the panelists think launch sites will evolve? Will every country have multiple sites like airports? Will we see an expansion of existing sites, for example, at Kourou, Florida? And maybe every one of you can give a short answer, starting with Mr. Wachter.
I think we will see an increased number of launch sites worldwide, but I don't believe that every country will have its own launch site. I think that wouldn't make sense because you also need to look at geography. Yeah, for the new small sats, you need polar and so-called sun-synchronous orbits. Which means it makes sense to launch on the northern hemisphere. Yeah, so it makes, for example, a lot of sense in Scotland, in Norway, or the German North Sea. So that's going to work, but it's not going to work everywhere. Yeah, so I believe we will see more launch sites, more launch pads. Though there will be a competition, which is good concerning the launch pads. But I don't believe that every country will or should have its own spaceport.
Thank you, Mr. Wachter. What do you think?
Well, every launch site will serve special purposes, and I agree with Mr. Wachter. There are different sizes of rockets owing to the different sizes of satellites. There are different orbits, as Mr. Wachter says. Polar orbits need different launch sites, namely more to the north or more to the south, while Kourou serves more geostationary orbits and big rockets. So I think we will see more launch sites for different niches. So this is a reason why I'm looking, for example, for a ship the German ship going to the North Sea to the Dogger Bank, and I would say it's ship and launch and come back. So this is very cheap and will serve most probably these small rockets. Thank you.
Mr. Käse, what do you think?
Well, the question I always ask myself, is it going to be the same industry? And my guess would be it's definitely not the same industry. When you look at the airline industry, airline and airports are not owned by the same people. Fraport is not Lufthansa. Lufthansa is a customer of Fraport. And this is what it involves here. Running a test site or running a site, by the way, is very, very different business from running a rocket launcher server, which is in turn very different from building satellites. So what I would foresee is a differentiation of industries. We're probably going to have a launch site industry, and we will probably have a launching industry as well as the satellite industry. And where will they be placed? What I learned, I'm certainly not an expert in rockets, but what I learned from Jörn and Stefan, that you need roughly 2,000 kilometers of free open space inhabited of surface, because your first stage will come down. So you need to shoot somewhere where there's no people around for 2,000 kilometers, if I understood it correctly. And this means it must be water, because in Europe you don't have unpopulated area. So we will probably see it in proximity to water, where you have 2,000 kilometers of water ahead of you, and then heading north. Because for the reasons we just heard, that polar orbits are most important. So this is why the North Sea location is so interesting. And one final remark, when I asked Stefan and Jörn, and I hope I'm quoting them correctly, when you're launching in the North Sea, why do you worry so much about launching on the German part of the North Sea? Why did you go to the Swedish part or the Danish part? Well, it has a regulatory component to that, as far as I understood, because it's made much easier when you launch from a legislation that your rocket was certified by, rather than from a different location, right? So it would make sense to build this thing at the outmost German piece of water somewhere in the North Sea, in order to have a launch site on German soil, under German jurisdiction, which would probably, as far as I understood it, make a regulation much easier.
Thank you. And Mr. Aschbacher, what is your opinion on that?
Yes, it is true that more and more launch sites will come, but we will see for sure a combination of new launch sites that will, and they're already happening, they're already being made or being planned, but also a use of large launch sites, more the traditional ones, for smaller rockets. I mean, we should not forget that Elon Musk is launching from from Florida, which used to be the launch site for the moon rocket. Actually, he uses the same ramp. So the traditional classical launch sites will serve for the big ones, obviously, because they have the infrastructure and the facilities there, but will also open up for small launchers, and this will happen as well in Kourou, which is also aiming to do the same, but also in addition to new launch sites as they're coming up.
Thank you very much. We also received further questions, and that one goes to Professor Walter. How do you coordinate all the startups and initiatives in Bavaria that they are working more closely together in the future?
Well, I don't coordinate. Well, I'm talking to these companies, that's true. And I also, it's not only talking, but advising these companies. The point is, I think the market will do it. Every company has to look for its niche. And as in all over the world, the startups might be very many, but only a few will do it. That doesn't mean that the people from the other companies will lose their jobs. They will work with the other companies who are successful. So I'm looking forward for mergers, for the right niches, and this is part of the market. And I think companies should know that and shouldn't be disappointed if they fail and cooperate with other companies. So cooperation is very useful, it's important, and to know where the niche is, to know where the money comes from, this is very important. And I think this is true all over the world, in particular also in Europe and Germany.
Thank you. One more question, which is rather a longer question to Mr. Aschbacher. Do you think that one day it will be possible to see institutional launchers, Ariane, Vega or other, fly with parts made by new space companies like RFA? Or on the contrary, do you see new space companies using technologies of current big companies, Ariane Group, Avio, and etc.? Are there any programs within ESA foreseeing this?
Okay. It's a very long question, but the answer is relatively straightforward. We are not looking for, well, if we have competitions for rockets or satellites or whatever they are, we always have an open competition. That means anyone can apply. Whether now this supplier, this industry comes from a new space domain, as it is sometimes called, or more traditional space domain, doesn't matter to us as long as the product is good. Obviously, all the engineering parameters are meeting all the standards that we require, and the price is good. And if there's a competitive offer, any company can bid for any parts of the overall landscape. So yes, this is open in both ways. Of course, it always depends on these companies making good offers.
Thank you. One more question that was addressed to you. When will you add small launches to the Ariane program or even replace it?
But the Ariane program, by definition, is the Ariane program. The small launches are in a very different category. As we know, RFA is launching up to 1,000, 1,300 kilos. So this is a very different category. But yes, if RFA goes up to the tonnage, as we call it, to the size of satellites that are launched today by Ariane, then I really look forward to the competition.
Thank you very much. I have one last question to Mr. Walter that I was very curious about, because you took a very close look at the technology of the engine of the rocket of the RFA. What do you think? Is it the heat start over other competitors?
Yes, I think that RFA has two advantages. One is the pre-combustion. Pre-combustion is highly advanced. It is very complicated, but I don't doubt that the engineers of RFA will do that. Having achieved that, they will have a very highly efficient engine. That's one point. And the other point is, and I think this is also very important, they have an upper stage, an orbital stage, they call it. And this is important because then they can launch different satellites in one launch going to different orbits. And this means they can put 3 or 4 satellites up into space and still put them in different orbits. This can be also only done with an orbital upper stage. And this is a big advantage. And they are saying that they can also sell this orbital stage to other rocket factories. So I think this is a big advantage. And this is why I believe in Rocket Factory Augsburg.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank all of you for taking the time, for being our panelists, and for sharing all your knowledge, your insights, and also your ideas. Thank you very much. And now next to me are again our 2 founders that must have felt this last minutes like oil on their skin with so many compliments. Jörn, what was most important to you?
I think bottom line from what we learned today is we're living in an old world, and if we take the panelists as the average opinion of the population, we look at people who are disrupting this, right, and who are changing and who are challenging this environment. I believe we're in the exact right place to do that. Here at Rocket Factory to create more what we call new space, and I think we will make it.
Definitely. Stefan, what are your key takeaways from that panel discussion?
Well, really fantastic. I was quite overwhelmed that the opinion is so clear that you need to disrupt existing industry with startups. Mm-hmm. There's lots of literature on this topic. It's called the dilemma of the inventor. And I really think that the opinion that was voiced today is really showing the way where this industry is developing into.
Today we are celebrating the opening event. What are your next steps?
The next steps for us are focused on engine tests. We have built a prototype engine that's basically fully integrated. It has the power pack. It basically has all components that you would need for the flight motor. It's currently in Sweden on our test stand, and we have a very dedicated team that puts in a lot of effort to basically proceed now with the first longer hot fires of the engine. And this is the first data that we need to really iron out where we basically are in the design point and what sort of performance index we can use for first flight. So this is super exciting. You've noticed our team here in Augsburg is basically welding and building the first stage tank. And if we're really lucky, these elements, tanks, structures, and engine will be very close to a flight readiness level by the end of the year.
Great. And now that we're nearly at the end of this event, Jörn, is there anything you would like to mention and to address to our audience?
Yeah, one important point to add, I think, is join our journey. Right? Either if you are a future employee, a supplier, a potential investor, or a customer in the future. Mr. Aschbacher almost said that he directly wants to sign and be an anchor customer with ESA, so it's great to hear. Let's make it happen. I think we will try to make sure that we will make every euro count here at the Rocket Factory, and that it's actually the best place to be in new space.
Thank you very much. So truly a day to celebrate. I would like to thank everyone who participated in this event. Of course, a big, big thank you to our panelists that shared their vision with us. And I'm pretty sure that these guys and everyone else working for the Rocket Company, the Rocket Factory, will rock it. And yeah, thank you very much. Please take care. Thank you for all the questions that really made it even more valuable and added more interesting facts to our discussion. Take care and let's experience the new space, everyone, and maybe as a tourist also. I want to be a tourist. That is my goal now. Thank you very much. Take care.